The first thing Franklin Foster noticed when he stepped onto the alien transport was the smell, not a metaphorical, diplomatic sort of smell. An actual, eye-watering, nose-hair-burning stench that clawed up the back of his throat and made him gag on instinct. It was like someone had microwaved sulfur inside a dead skunk, then sprayed it with ammonia for good measure. "Welcome aboard the Hethari treaty vessel," the alien said, voice filtered through a translator clipped to its chest. It had 6 legs, stood just over 5 feet tall, and had skin like dry riverbed clay. "Please follow me to the diplomatic chamber," Franklin coughed into his sleeve. "Is this normal air for you?" The alien paused, one eye swiveling toward him. "This is our standard atmosphere, filtered with trace emissions from our reactors for optimal thermal balance. Is it unsuitable for you?" "It's fine," Franklin choked, rubbing his eyes. "Just strong." He followed the creature down a corridor coated in a translucent resin. Every step released a puff of the foul vapor, like the floor itself was sweating. Franklin's boots squeaked slightly on the sticky path. He kept breathing shallow, trying not to draw too much of it in. His head was already starting to spin. He wasn't even supposed to be here. Franklin was a field chemist with the Earth Coalition's Civil Support Division. His job was to test water sources, confirm soil contamination, and occasionally tell angry farmers that yes, the radiation levels in their carrots exceeded safe thresholds. Then, 2 days ago, he got an urgent call from the Coalition's Interplanetary Liaison Office. They needed someone who understood atmospheric chemistry, fast. Apparently, a delegation from the Hethari Confederation had docked at Earth's orbital station for preliminary alliance talks. Everything had gone smoothly until one of the Hethari collapsed mid-meeting. Then another. Then a third began vomiting a black tar-like substance. The medical team on the station was baffled. The Hethari claimed it was Earth's air. The humans insisted it was impossible. The station used a sealed, purified mix of nitrogen and oxygen, well within safe parameters for both species. The Hethari weren't buying it, so they invited a human to their own ship to observe the difference. No suit, no filters. A test of goodwill. Franklin had drawn the short straw. By the time he reached the diplomatic chamber, his eyes were bloodshot, his throat felt sandpapered, and he was sweating through his shirt. The air was thicker here, and the temperature had climbed a few degrees. "Mr. Foster," said a voice from the far side of the room. Another Hethari, taller than the guide, stepped forward. It wore a sash of woven metal strands and had a faint luminescence to its skin. "You are unwell." Franklin's knees wobbled. "I might need to sit. Please do." A padded platform unfolded from the wall. It was the first soft surface he'd seen since arriving. He dropped onto it, sucking air through his teeth. "What is the composition of this air?" Franklin asked, blinking slowly. The Hethari diplomat looked over at an assistant, who brought up a holographic panel. 74% nitrogen, 22% oxygen, and 4% of what we call ethane gases. They are byproducts of our reactor systems, essential for maintaining equilibrium aboard our ships. Can you name the ethane compounds? They are stable, not toxic to us. Franklin nodded faintly. Well, they're toxic to me. And probably to your own people too, if they're exposed for too long. The diplomat tilted its head. Explain. Franklin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small portable scanner. It was already blinking red. He held it up, let it run a quick analysis, and read the results. Hydrogen sulfide, chlorinated hydrocarbons, trace ketones. This stuff is bad news for mammalian lungs. It's even worse in a closed environment. The Hethari looked stunned, or at least its face muscles shifted in a way Franklin hadn't seen before. Our systems filter those as part of our standard recycling loop. Not well enough, Franklin muttered. You're basically sitting in your own exhaust. The diplomat stepped back. Our people are falling ill because of ourselves. Looks like it. The assistant suddenly dropped to one knee. His breathing became shallow, eyes fluttering. Franklin lurched forward. Hey, your guy's going down. The diplomat barked something, and two other Hethari rushed in. They dragged the assistant out, leaving behind a smear of black fluid on the floor. Franklin stood slowly. He was dizzy, nauseous, and his temples throbbed with every heartbeat. Your ship needs a neutralizer, he said. Something that can bind to the volatile compounds in your air and either render them inert or convert them to something else. I can make one. But I need a lab. The diplomat hesitated, then gave a tight nod. We will take you to our chemistry bay. Franklin followed them down another corridor. He had to lean on the wall 3 times. By the time they reached the lab, his shirt was soaked in sweat and his vision was tunneling at the edges. The lab was cramped, with walls lined in vertical tanks and glossy storage drawers. Franklin scanned the labels. Most were in Hethari script, but a few had chemical symbols. He found what he needed: fast sodium bicarbonate, hydrogen peroxide, isopropyl alcohol, and a selection of polymer gels. I'll whip up a prototype, he said, grabbing a beaker. This won't fix your entire ship, but it might clean a room. If it works, we scale it. He measured, mixed, adjusted pH levels, and tested for reactivity. The first batch bubbled violently and turned brown. He dumped it. The second one foamed too much. The third stayed clear and stable. Franklin soaked a strip of cloth in it and waved it through the air. The scanner's red light dimmed. Getting somewhere, he muttered. He made a larger batch, poured it into a pressure sprayer, and walked back to the diplomatic chamber. The diplomat stood waiting, flanked by 2 guards. I'm going to spray this, Franklin said, raising the nozzle. If it works, you'll notice the air clear up in seconds. If it doesn't, well, I'll pass out again. He squeezed the trigger. A fine mist hissed into the room. It smelled faintly of lemon and bleach. The haze in the air began to thin. The diplomat's eyes widened. I can feel the difference, Franklin nodded. It's binding to the euthan gases, neutralizing them. One of the guards staggered forward and sniffed the air. This is breathable, not forever, Franklin warned. You'll need to install real filtration. But this gives you time. He dropped the sprayer and collapsed into the chair again. You all carry these gases on your skin, he said. It's seeping out of your vents, your bodies, everything. You need to clean yourselves before entering human airspace, or it's going to keep happening. The diplomat looked shaken. You diagnosed this in under 1 hour. I've smelled worse, Franklin muttered, eyes closed. They let him rest in a sterile room with filtered air. The burning in his lungs faded. A medical team checked his vitals: elevated heart rate, mild hypoxia, early signs of chemical irritation in his throat. They gave him oxygen and fluids. He slept for 12 hours. When he woke up, the diplomat was waiting. We have synthesized your neutralizer. It is being distributed across our ship. Our people are recovering. Franklin sat up slowly. Good. We request your assistance in designing a permanent system. He nodded. I'll need more time and coffee. The Hethari blinked. We can procure this coffee. Franklin pulled himself upright. Get me back to Earth Station first. I need a proper lab. The diplomat extended a hand. Franklin took it. Your adaptability is remarkable, Franklin coughed. We have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. The diplomat tilted its head again. Your mother must be very inventive, Franklin chuckled. She raised 3 boys in rural Idaho. She made antifreeze out of vinegar and salt once. The Hethari stared at him. Long story. He returned to the station with a sample of the neutralizer and a full report. Earth's engineers began modifying the docking bays to include pre-entry sprays for Hethari visitors. Within a week, the number of incidents dropped to 0. Franklin was offered a commendation. He declined it. Instead, he asked for a small, climate-controlled lab and a dedicated research team. He had ideas for a permanent atmospheric balance system that could adapt to multiple species. He got his lab. 6 months later, the Hethari signed the treaty. Franklin stood beside the diplomat as the documents were exchanged. I still can't believe your body didn't shut down entirely, the Hethari said. Franklin shrugged. Humans are weird like that. You survived what incapacitated trained officers. Well, Franklin said, I also puked behind your airlock. Don't forget that. Still. Remarkable. Franklin looked around the room. The air was crisp, clean. The new filtration system hummed gently in the background. He smiled. Let's keep it that way. Franklin adjusted the sterile gloves with a wince. The thin latex clung to his raw knuckles, still chafed from the chemical spill 2 days ago. He'd gotten too eager during the 3rd formulation trial and splashed himself with a diluted oxidizer. Nothing serious, but the Hethari medtechs had panicked and insisted on isolating him for 40 minutes. Apparently, human skin bubbling triggered some sort of emergency protocol. Now, he stood in the Hethari vessel's atmospheric engineering bay, a space that resembled the inside of a mollusk crossed with a greenhouse. The walls pulsed faintly with a bioluminescent sheen, and the humidity hovered just above comfortable. A cluster of Hethari engineers formed a semicircle around him, their eye stalks twitching in asynchronous patterns. "I need to know how your air recyclers vent waste gases between cycles," Franklin said, pointing at the schematic hovering in front of them. "This diagram doesn't show the secondary flow chambers." One of the engineers, a younger Hethari with a pale carapace and a limp in its rear left leg, stepped forward. "They are not drawn because they are considered auxiliary. We purge them every 30 rotations. Every 30 rotations, Franklin said, blinking. "That's nearly a month, correct?" He leaned forward, trying not to let irritation seep into his voice. "You're letting reactive compounds build up in the auxiliary chambers for a month and wondering why people are keeling over." "It is standard maintenance," the engineer replied, hesitant. "Then the standard is killing you." Another Hethari, this one older and mottled with age spots across its thorax, shifted its weight. "The compounds are not lethal to us in controlled amounts." Franklin exhaled sharply and stepped back from the schematic. "They don't stay controlled. They concentrate. They layer on top of each other. It's like marinating yourselves in a slow cooking gas leak." He turned toward the workbench, where a transparent canister hissed and released a faint vapor. The prototype filtration gel inside was stabilizing under pressure. Its color had deepened to a light violet, which was promising. The last batch had turned orange and nearly ignited in contact with the Hethari atmospheric compounds. "Do you have the test chamber prepped?" Franklin asked. The young engineer tapped a panel on its chest. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow room sealed by a double airlock. Inside, a mannequin-like figure stood surrounded by a fine mist. Franklin picked up the canister, checked the pressure gauge, and walked it to the chamber. "I'm going to release a measured dose. Monitor how quickly it neutralizes airborne toxins." "We have sensors calibrated," the elder Hethari confirmed. Franklin entered the first airlock, waited for the hiss of depressurization, then stepped into the chamber. He clipped the canister to the release hook, twisted the dial, and pressed the nozzle. A steady stream of vapor curled into the air, mixing with the dense mist already present. He stepped back and watched. The sensors lit up, displaying compound concentrations in real time. Within 45 seconds, volatile organics dropped by 60%. At the 2-minute mark, nearly 90% of reactive particles had bonded with the gel vapor and precipitated into harmless residue on the floor. He stepped out, pulled off the gloves, and turned to the engineers. "That's the most stable version yet. I'd say we're one iteration away from a deployable unit." The elder Hethari blinked slowly. "Your persistence is uncharacteristic of most species we have encountered. People say that when I reorganize kitchen cabinets too." The young engineer tilted its head. "Do you reorganize kitchen cabinets often, only when I'm avoiding phone calls?" There was a pause. Then, from the far wall, a chime sounded. It was deeper than most alerts Franklin had heard aboard the ship. The elder Hethari moved to a console and flicked a tendril across the surface. "A vessel from the Hetharius cluster has docked. They are sensitive to airborne pollutants." "This could be an ideal test environment." Franklin raised a brow. "You're offering to let me gas the diplomats. They volunteered to enter a trial chamber after we explained the nature of your work." He rubbed the back of his neck. "All right, but I want full observation access. And no one steps in until we've verified the neutralization levels hold for at least 15 minutes. The elder gestured toward the corridor. "We will escort you." Franklin followed them down a sloping passage lit with soft green panels. As they walked, he noticed small vents at ankle height, each releasing a faint puff of filtered gas. They hadn't been there last week. "New system." "Yes," the young engineer said proudly. "We have begun installing micro-diffusers in high-traffic areas. Inspired by your portable sprayer." Franklin nodded, impressed. Nice. That should help reduce exposure without overhauling your whole infrastructure. When they reached the trial chamber, two Hethari stood waiting. They were tall and narrow, with translucent skin stretched over delicate frames. Their faces looked like elongated jellyfish domes, filled with drifting bioluminescent threads. They have sealed themselves in exo-husks, the elder Hethari explained, but their outer sensors will still detect chemical balance. Franklin watched as the mist delivery system activated. The same violet vapor released, curling around the Hethari. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of them raised a limb, signaling approval. A readout appeared on the adjacent panel. Airborne toxins inside the chamber were registering at less than 8% of baseline. Franklin crossed his arms and exhaled through his nose. They're reacting positively, the elder said. They should. This version's got a binding agent synthesized from your own bioresin. It's compatible with your molecular structure, so it doesn't rebound toxins like the earlier ones did. The young engineer leaned over the console. Your species learned to do this without external nanotech. We used to clean up oil spills with hair and dish soap. You adapt or you drown. A silence settled over the chamber as the Hethari began moving more freely, limbs extending and relaxing as the air cleared. One of them touched a panel and emitted a soft chime. They request a sample, the elder translated. Franklin popped open his case and handed over a sealed vial. Tell them to keep it refrigerated. The binding agent degrades above 50 Celsius. They will comply. Hours later, Franklin sat in the ship's common rest area, watching condensation bead on a mug of something that probably wasn't tea but had the right color. The young engineer approached, carrying a small tablet. There is a question from our design team, it said, settling across from him. They ask what human systems were originally designed for this kind of filtration. None, Franklin said, sipping the lukewarm drink. We borrowed bits and pieces. Pool cleaners, fire suppression foams, even some stuff from old scuba systems. The trick isn't copying, it's combining. The engineer tapped the tablet, made a note. You do not fear improvisation. Not really. We're used to things going sideways, not according to plan. The engineer considered this. Is that why you do not appear concerned when things fail? Franklin chuckled softly. Concerned, sure, but you learn that failure's just a loud version of progress. The engineer stood. There is much our species has yet to understand about yours. Get in line, Franklin muttered, stretching his legs. Later that night, back in his assigned cabin, a low-ceilinged space with walls that pulsed faintly when he moved, Franklin typed up a report for Earth's Coalition Liaison Office. He included the latest test results, the reaction of the Hethari, and the new venting system adaptation. He ended the report with a short note. Recommend immediate cross-species training on atmospheric integration. Current alien vessels are chemically incompatible with human biology. And apparently their own. Suggest we stop treating this as a diplomatic footnote and start treating it like a survival issue. He sent it, leaned back and stared at the ceiling until the lights dimmed. Somewhere down the corridor, the soft hiss of another diffuser kicked on. He smiled faintly. Progress. The filtration towers were humming louder than usual. Franklin stood just outside the central processing column, watching the violet mist curl up from the floor grates. Somewhere inside the core, the gel compound was atomizing through the Hethari's new dispersal system. It had taken 3 weeks of tweaking, 2 near explosions, and 1 emergency decontamination wash after a batch reacted too enthusiastically with a copper alloy lining. But now, finally, the system was running at full capacity. 4 cycles without incident, said the younger Hethari engineer from behind him. Its name translated roughly to pair, and it had become Franklin's unofficial assistant since the Hethari demonstration. No reports of neural haze, bronchial collapse, or dermal acidification. That last one was new to me, Franklin said, glancing at the tablet pair held. Didn't realize your skin secreted a stabilizer only under duress. It does not. That is the problem. He rubbed his eyes. Right. A door hissed open across the chamber. Another Hethari entered, older, with a faded green crest along its thoracic plate. It carried a sealed cylinder in one clawed appendage. "This is the final atmospheric sample from the old purification loop," it said, handing the container to Pear. "We are terminating the backup system tonight." Franklin raised a brow. "You're fully switching to the neutralizer. We have recalibrated all flow regulators. The gel vapor is now integrated directly into our heat dispersion units. There is no longer a need for redundancy." Pear passed the sample to Franklin, who held it up to the light. Inside, a swirl of particulate matter floated in suspension. Even through the sealed glass, he could detect faint discoloration at the edges. "You were breathing this for over 200 cycles." He turned the cylinder slowly. "That's sorry, I know you don't use blood, but this would have shredded our alveoli." "Yes," the elder said, "we are aware now." Franklin gestured toward the analyzer console. "Mind if I run this, please?" He placed the sample into the chamber and activated the sensor array. The display lit up with a spectrum analysis: nitrogen oxides, vaporized ketones, trace ammonia derivatives, and something that flagged as unknown but highly reactive. "Yep," Franklin muttered. "This stuff would have killed me in about 20 minutes. Pear leaned closer. "You were exposed to it for over 90, I know." "Why did you not succumb?" He exhaled through his nose. "Part of that's luck, some of it's lung capacity. I've spent years working in toxic environments. You build up a kind of tolerance, not immunity, but a resistance. I also hyperventilated for a while, which probably kept the worst of it from saturating my bloodstream." The elder Hethari rotated one eye toward him. "Your species is unsettlingly difficult to eliminate." "Thanks," Franklin said. "We try." Later that rotation, he found himself standing in the docking bay. It looked different now. Sleek polymer ducts lined the ceiling, releasing thin trails of mist that glowed faintly under the overhead lights. A set of portable scrubbers stood idle along one wall, no longer needed. The room smelled faintly of citrus and salt. A delegation from the Jari collective was arriving, and the Hethari wanted to test the system under more variable conditions. The Jari were known for their sensitivity to trace compounds, especially esters and sulfur-linked hydrocarbons. If the gel neutralizer worked here, it would be proof of cross-species compatibility. Franklin checked his datapad. The ship was due in 9 minutes. Pear joined him, carrying a small case. "These are the handheld sensors calibrated for Jari biochemistry. We integrated their respiratory baselines into the detection matrix." "Good," Franklin said. "We'll need real-time feedback." When the Jari vessel docked, the airlock connected with a low clunk. A moment later, 3 figures emerged. They were tall and slender, their bodies encased in semi-permeable membranes that rippled with iridescent color. Their faces were flat, featureless save for a single horizontal slit where their visual organ sat. Franklin stepped forward, holding out an open hand. "Welcome aboard." The lead Jari inclined its head. "We accept your air." "That's the most generous thing anyone's said to me all week." The Jari moved with measured grace into the docking bay. The mist diffused around them, absorbing the trace odors from their own atmospheric carryover. Franklin watched the monitors carefully. No spikes, no off-gassing, no chemical blooms. Pear tapped the sensor. "They are not reacting negatively." The Jari turned to Franklin. "This environment is neutral, no discomfort." "Excellent," the elder Hethari said, emerging from the far entrance. "We have achieved equilibrium." Franklin folded his arms. "Took long enough." The Jari gestured toward the ceiling ducts. "Was this your creation?" "It was a group effort," he replied. "I just happened to be the one who didn't pass out." The Jari emitted a low, warbling sound. It took Franklin a moment to realize they were laughing. "I'll take that as a yes," he said. Several hours later, after the Jari had departed and the bay was undergoing its final filter cycle, Franklin sat in the observation alcove watching the mist vent from the ceiling in slow, pulsing waves. The lighting had shifted to the cooler spectrum, casting long shadows across the floor. Pear approached with a folded datasheet. "We compiled the final toxicity index." Franklin took it, eyes scanning the numbers. "Below threshold across all quadrants." "Yes." "Even in the high traffic zones." He leaned back against the wall, shoulders sagging. "Then we're done." Pear's eye stalks shifted inward. "You are leaving? My part's finished. You don't need me here anymore." The elder Hethari joined them silently. "You have altered the way we live aboard our own vessels." Franklin didn't answer right away. He watched the mist rise, settle, and vanish again. "I just gave you room to breathe." "You did more than that," the elder said. "You made us question what we had accepted as normal." He shrugged. "I've spent years telling people their water's poisoned. This was just a new version of the same thing." Pear stepped forward. "Your species adapts through confrontation." "Pretty much," Franklin said. "We don't evolve gracefully. We trip into solutions and duct tape them together until they stick." The elder tilted its head. "It is effective. Messy, but effective." They stood in silence for a while, then the elder extended a small capsule, a gift. "Our engineers encoded your contributions into the ship's core archive. This contains a full copy." Franklin accepted it. "Thanks. When you return to your world," the elder said, "inform them that the Hethari no longer carry poison in our breath." "Glad to hear it." As he boarded the return shuttle, Franklin looked back once. The docking bay was lit with a soft golden hue now, the mist barely visible. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and that was enough.